Hello, 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 and welcome back to another amazing episode of AngularAir, or at least we hope so. I'm your host, Alyssa Nichol, and with me today on the panel, I have Justin with me. Hello, Justin. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm really good. I wanted to ask you, is it like real quick intro, what's one thing you're looking forward to this weekend?
This weekend, the sun. It's been very rainy here and cold, and I don't know if it's going to be warm, but the sun's going to be out. So I'm really looking
Epic.
forward to the sun. I love the sun.
I can definitely +1 that. Mike is also on our panel. Mike, scale of 1 to 10, how you doing today?
We'll go with a 7 today.
A 7. Nice.
Yeah. Which is good. It was a rough morning, so it was around a 4 this morning, but doing much better
but
now.
you're rolling back up to a 7. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our guest of honor, who we could not be more pleased about, more honored to have on the show, Minko. Is it Gechev or Gechev? Come on, I got to do it right. Gechev?
Gechev.
Gechev. Oh,
yeah.
That's even better than what I said. Wow.
Pretty authentic Eastern European accent here by you.
Minko, how are you doing today?
Doing really good. Actually, my morning also started around 4, and now it is heading to 9.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That's a little bit of a brag, but we'll take it. We'll take it. So, Minko, we are here to talk about not only the existing amazingness that is Angular, but the future of Angular. And I just could not be like, oh my goodness, more excited. Whenever Justin said you wanted to come on the show, I was like, so welcome, my darling. Tell us what you want to talk about today. What direction are we going? I feel like there's a lot of futures that we could, at least a lot of Angular futures that I've envisioned. So we could.
Yeah, let's talk about all the futures and see where, and actually discuss the future today. We can discuss the near-term future, like version 16. We can touch on to version 17, or even we can even go further into the future, maybe 2024, 2025.
And, are there plans that far out? I mean, or maybe for Alyssa that feels far out. Is that not far out for code planning?
There are plans that far out, and some of them are a little bit more dynamic because, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We have large language models right now, and we don't know if they're not going to have any impact on development. We may want to incorporate them for better developer experience, let's say. But that's what we can chat about if you're down to.
Just give me about like 30 seconds. I'm going to step out. I'm going to grab some popcorn, kick my feet up, and I'm just going to listen and enjoy the ride.
Listen, Mike, we all know that you also have secret plans for 2025 of Angular. All right. I feel like every single one of you has like a mission, like a secret mission. I was reading, have you all read Sanders Signals post that was on GitHub, and it was like walking through like Angular signals and like what, the background. It was like a really cool like post, but I was like, he also shares some opinions on like where we could go with technology, like the Angular platform. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many people in the community that have plans. So Minko, tell us for 16, is that fall?
It is coming in about 5 weeks.
Oh, not fall. What?
Yeah, it's almost feature freeze. We almost know what exactly we're going to ship. Almost.
Oh my goodness gracious.
There's already next or versions of 16 already published under the next label, correct?
Yeah. We already have people on Twitter just like sharing everything that we're going to announce in 5 weeks.
Hey, they're doing a great job. It's a free marketing team as far as I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just encouraging them to continue doing so.
Hey, so I have an app. My repo's on 14. I have a PR up to beta 15. If I follow that up right away with the journey to 16, is it pretty straightforward? Do we have any breaking changes or anything that we need to be aware of? Or
it will be pretty straightforward. Yeah, you're just gonna get more router APIs. You're going to you're gonna get a lot of things, but like from the framework side of things, you're gonna get more router APIs. The router is going to we're going to automatically transform your source code, let's say, from class-based like guards and resolvers to functional. And if you want to continue using resolvers and guards as classes, you can do that. Actually, that's what the migration does. Just wraps your classes with functions. You're going to, I think that's kind of the only major migration that we're going to do. That's it. And it's like automatically updates your code by removing the interfaces and wrapping the class in functions. That's it. Yeah.
Interesting.
So is there a class inside the function as a result, or is it just a function?
So the resolver is still a function, and we're just passing your class to the function, and the function knows what to do with it.
Okay. That makes sense.
Is that using the inject function to get our class?
Yeah.
Got it. So
yeah,
clean.
the migration should be pretty straightforward,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of things coming, as you know, signals, a lot around server-side rendering, a lot around tooling. Not everything has leaked yet, but I assume it's gonna go out in about like a week or so.
Oh, that's too funny.
That tells me that in your head you're like, should I talk about it or should I wait to see if they're going to keep digging into the PRs, read all the PRs to discover what's coming?
I would wait. Yeah, I really like when someone discovers something and they tweet about it, and after that we're like, "Yeah, it's coming! Isn't that cool?" Because there are more and more.
Across one of those this morning.
Yeah.
Actually, it was router based.
Which one is it?
The ability to bind route parameters to component inputs.
Yeah. That's like someone requested that 6 years ago. I'm happy that we're moving that forward. Like just combined all the features that version 16 and I guess the minors of version 15 introduced. We counted the number of thumbs up for each one of the features that we resolved. I would say it is between 2,500 and 3,000 thumbs up worth of features.
Oh my gosh.
Nice.
Chaos Monster coming in. Monster coming in with the chaos of no breaking changes. I think.
Well, there will be some breaking changes, but I'm just like on the scale of any other release, just updating to version 15 to version 5 of the TypeScript compiler. That's like practically a breaking change because it's a major version of the TypeScript compiler.
Right.
Actually, this is not related directly to Angular, but since you brought up TypeScript, with them going to version 5, are they going to potentially change their versioning scheme to be more Semver aligned, or are they still going to stick with their minor versions, or actually their breaking changes?
Oh, not really familiar. Not really know. I don't really know what their plans are. Yeah.
Okay.
I assume I haven't heard about changes there. We're familiar. Okay. We're like really well familiar with all the breaking changes they introduced because we need to update. I think it's like 145 million lines of TypeScript in Google. Not we. There is luckily a separate team of like 2 people, I think.
I like how you leave with 145 and I was like, okay, then you got a million.
It's a lot of code, yeah.
Right. So you're saying that there's a new version of TypeScript that Angular 16 needs to get a bump to?
Yeah, it's going to be TypeScript 5.
So like when we went from 14 to 15, RxJS dependency bumped, right? And I think that exposed, like one of the things I ran into is exposed like some more stronger typing that RxJS provides that repos didn't have, right? So now you have to kind of deal with that. Is there any potential for, I mean, obviously there's probably potential, but anything you might be aware of the 15 to 16 and the TypeScript change that may result in something we get ahead of?
Let's see. Well, I'm actually let's take a look at the TypeScript 5 release to see what exactly could be potentially impactful. I'm sure there are plenty of features there, like the module resolution bundler. It may have some impact on compilation times. I mean, like pretty much everything is valid. I think absolutely everything would be applicable to Angular besides the new version of the Decorators. Because temporarily, at least, we're going to continue supporting the experimental decorators that TypeScript provides rather than moving to what ECMAScript like standardized on. Which is very, very similar to the experimental decorators in the sense the way Angular uses them, because we only care about their syntax pretty much, because the Angular compiler, that's for ahead of time compilation. The Angular compiler takes the decorators and transforms them to something. We almost don't depend on their runtime semantics, so we will just have to adjust and make sure that the typings are valid, and that's going to be probably for version 17.
Cool. I do have a question on the decorator stuff. Is maybe for the future. I'm going to ask it now, right? Even though we're talking about 16, I'm going to ask it now. Is there a future that you could see where we wouldn't have to like decorate our classes with add injectable, and so we could still leverage dependency injection, but we could write just normal classes that we could use outside of Angular?
Yeah, I'll say there is such a future. We just have to register these classes somewhere so that we know that they're available for DI. Yeah, there is a future that relays way less heavily on decorators, I would say. And we are going to share more about this future actually on Monday, I think. We are going to release the new standalone like RFC. Not standalone, excuse me. We're going to release the Signals RFCs. There's going to be a series of RFCs that we're going to share publicly, and some of them have introduced further simplification around the way we have been using decorators and open the doors for reactive inputs, let's say, and way more. So would you want us to just like discuss first version 16, like start with framework, after that talk about maybe tooling or components?
Yes.
And server-side rendering, and after that, maybe chat a little bit about version 17.
You are the owner of all of this exciting information. However you want to go about sharing all of that, we're ready for it.
Yeah, that plan sounds good to me. Let us do it.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's separate the features in version 16 into like large features such as server-side rendering. Let's say the work that is happening in Material, Signals, and some really great developer experience improvements, such as required inputs and all these features in the router that we already mentioned. Like, as you already know, Signals is like becoming a real thing in Angular to simplify the way we're using change detection, and also to just like fighting some of the rough edges there with expression has changed after it has been checked, also running stuff outside of the zone. All these things are just not trivial, and they're kind of design flaws to an extent of the dependency injection of the change detection mechanism that we have been having in Angular for a while. And also the current change detection mechanism is very global, and it doesn't allow us to do some very fine-grained optimizations. For instance, running change detection locally in only the affected components by a particular change in the data model, or something like very fine-grained loading of code, which potentially makes our application resumable. So all these, the current model with Zone.js has been blocking us from moving forward with these optimizations. So that's why we would like to explore an alternative model with Signals and also make it backward compatible. Like by backward compatible, I mostly mean interoperable. So we'll be able to use Signals in Zone applications, and people don't really have to migrate their Zone applications to Signal if they don't need to.
Question, because you said something there that was pretty interesting, is I lost my train of thought. That's not good.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Right?
I hate that. I'm so sorry.
I had a notification pop up and I was like, no, wait. It wasn't Signals.
It wasn't Signals.
No.
Something about fine-grained.
Yes, that's it. So we've kind of moved to the idea of fine-graining loading application data or logic at different levels. We did it only at the router level through modules. That kind of got pushed by the wayside a little bit with Standalone, that you could do that at the component level. Are we talking more fine-grained than just a specific component, but potentially different logic within a component?
Well, in the near future, by near future, I mean the next like 12, 15 months, it's probably going to be component level. But definitely nothing is stopping us from even finer-grained lazy loading. For example, I'm working closely with, by the way, I really like how we read each other's minds. Like, you forgot your question, but I knew what it is.
I was freaked out by that. I was like, whoa.
I probably did something facially that said,
when he said fine-grained.
Wait, what?
Right.
My mind, you can see my mind start going.
I'm working closely with between the Angular and you know about the Wiz team at Google, right? This is the framework that is like Google Search and Gmail and Photos and Drive and Calendar. All these products are running on. And as you can imagine, for search, performance is pretty important. And fine-grained code loading is pretty important as well. So they have like extraction of the... So you can develop components in... Actually, that's an idea that recently Quick made popular. You have a component with event handlers. What happens at build time is that the compiler can extract the event handlers out of the component declaration so that when you click on a button, we can just download the event handler associated with a particular component, not the whole component. So yeah, that's an idea that WIS has been having for a while and we are familiar with, and also we're working closely together. We have regular syncs and exploring and collaborating on work like that. I can't say that this is going to land in a particular version at this point. Also, if it lands, it might not be exactly the Angular that people are using today. So it's not going to be like a no-op to start using this.
So
But
the
there might be
fine-grained bits that you're talking about, how is that different than like an effect that's like being called and like updated because of a signal? Like, is that what you're talking about? Like, that's a fine-grained piece that's inside of a component that's like being updated, that's different from normal change detection cycles. So like that, or like even more
That's
smaller?
a pretty yeah. This is going to have an effect definitely on change detection as well. So when you have an effect, when you have a signal that is you have bounds to a particular view in your template, we're going to check only this part of the template, only this view for changes. This is going to land, I'll say probably somewhere around version 17 timeline.
Okay.
But Alex and Pavel, they designed the solution in a pretty amazing way. What I'm talking about also is that imagine you have a component and you server-side render this component. So when you get the server-side rendered view delivered to the browser, you just have HTML and CSS. You don't have JavaScript at this point. And you have a button, let's say, somewhere in the view. When the user clicks on the button, something in the browser can trigger download only of the event handler that is associated with this button, rather than downloading your whole application or your whole component. So this is something that is not possible in Angular today. It is possible in other frameworks such as Quick.
I see.
And WIS. Signals would provide a path towards such feature.
To that. Oh, okay.
If you would like to have it.
Okay.
And we're still not sure if we really want to have it because it sets some constraints on developer experience.
Minko, it's really interesting to hear you talking about that because I reflect back on the library that you have that you created for links. I forget the name of it. I'm sorry. Quickly, yeah. Where you on demand, when somebody hovers over the link, then you're fetching that stuff, right? So it's like you're delivering something fast, and then only when somebody's going to interact with it are you then getting the additional bits to do more interesting stuff. It sounds really similar.
Yeah. This could work with a variety of different types of prefetching. We have been, it's interestingly enough, predictive prefetching is not something that is as heavily used right now, but who knows, with the latest advancements in AI, maybe that's an opportunity.
Yes. So so signals, when we talk about signals, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people probably listening right now that are like, what are we even talking about? What is a signal? What are we referring to? Like, can we kind of summarize it and high level sort of thing?
Sure, yeah. Signal is a value which we can bind to and also which we can set pretty much. And that's it. And when we set this value, the signals library can notify the framework that something has changed. So that's one of the primitives the signal offer. The other one is that we can create a computed value. So we can create a computed value that depends on one or more signals. And when we update one or like multiple of these signals, we're going to send like a kind of an update. We're going to mark this computed value as dirty, as changed, because it eventually needs to be recomputed at a certain point when we want to read it. So the computed values is a second primitive. And the third one is effects.
Yeah.
So we can observe one or more signals. And when one of the signals changes, we can execute a function. This is called the effect. That's what signals is. And this can drive the Angular's change detection very easily because we can create signals that we bind to in our templates. When these signals change, we can get the framework notified, and Angular can run its change detection to see whether it needs to update the view or not.
So it's kind of like the concept I think about, like we have RxJS and observables, and we think about, we have data that we need to work with, and maybe we wrap it and put it through an observable so we can get some advantages out of change detection and things like that. And it seems like signals is a similar sort of concept, that we're wrapping our data in something that then can be used to help performance and things like that as a result of it being in that spot.
Yeah, I have always been thinking about RxJS more about like a way to handle asynchronously like stream of data. So in this way, like we can think about them in a similar way, because like you can create a behavior subject and we can set its value. Like you can invoke like next, and over time you're going to get new values and so on and so forth. About signals, the way I think about them more is rather than having we can think about it as a stream, but we can also think about it as like a name, let's say, which name changes still over time, but the goals are slightly different. For example, in signals, we don't have mapping of data. We don't have these high order functions that can transform the data. We can, the cool thing is that signals we can convert to observables, and from there we can use the paradigm that we are used to. If we are fans of RxJS, we can very easily apply our knowledge to signals in a very intuitive way. We just need one operator, which is called like from signal. This gives us an observable, and from there we can use all the different operators that RxJS provides. One cool thing is that also inputs, they could potentially be signals, which means that we can convert them to observables and have inputs as observables. This is one of the most demanded issues that we had in Angular.
I have two questions. One, you mentioned not having a mapping feature. Is it possible to create a signal using computed and only have one, use a single signal, easy to say, inside of it that is essentially going to do some sort of change operation, which would essentially function like a map? I know there's a lot more other operators from RxJS that may not make sense, but that's a potential scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This could act also as a filter or like a pipe.
Very true. My other question is, so there's an implementation of signals inside of Angular, and you mentioned that there is a hook from within a given signal to Angular's change detection. Is that the reason why Angular has its own implementation of signal and not potentially some generic community-wide signal library external to Angular?
Yeah, there are many reasons. I would say the main one is that this allows us the flexibility to design a signals implementation that fits the Angular change detection model the best, because we don't have to take an existing solution and kind of try to mold it, try to like make it into something that it might not be.
That makes sense. I know earlier you'd mentioned, and I also read in Sanders' post that I'll share at the end, about how effects are triggered batched and lazy, which means if you have multiple signals, it's only going to be triggered once. And I know it's like a super fine detail, but I was super curious at that point of like, what if you wanted it to be triggered with like each update? Like, is that just how it's going to be? Like, it's going to be like all or nothing, like either all of these signals got updated and so then that effect is like called upon, or is there a way to like single, like every time one of these, I don't know, maybe that's like a really bad.
Yeah. we can very much decide on so when an effect like let's say when a signal updates, it notifies the signals library, and we can decide what we would like to do from there. So we can decide whether we would like to batch like multiple updates into one and run change detection, or like process the signals in a certain way. Also, we can decide how we would like to schedule it, because there are different scheduling APIs right now. We can use the higher, like the task scheduling API, I guess, that Chrome offers. We can use like we have different like priorities, low and high priority, I guess. I don't think we have medium. We can use micro tasks or macro tasks. All this is an option. We can do any of these. Yeah. So that's on the signals part, but there is also more in version 16. Actually, that's like only one of the mainstreams that we have. The other one,
it's definitely been getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, and rightfully, because like even though we're making a lot of advancements on the server side rendering space, we're currently kind of catching up a little. We're not in a place where we're innovating or on the forefront, but we're gonna get there. Currently, we are implementing just non-destructive hydration, which would allow you to, yeah. Perfect question.
I'm like right there with Matthew. He said it at the beginning, and I was like itching to get to this one because I'm very excited about signals, but I am like, this direction excites me, and so I just want to. I want to tell us, Minko. Tell us.
Yeah. So imagine server-side rendering a view, and after that, you have the HTML and the CSS delivered to the browser. The browser renders your app. You have the DOM, and the browser finds the script tags that are referenced on the page and starts downloading the JavaScript. What Angular is doing today is to destroy everything and re-render it from scratch. And this may seem a little bit inefficient, may seem extremely slow, actually. In fact, it's not like terribly bad for two reasons. Like, browsers are fast, and also we worked with the metrics team at Chrome to ensure that this doesn't cause any unwanted effects in Core Web Vitals. But in some cases, it can still slow your application down. Like, imagine you start downloading an image on the page, and after that, Angular takes over, destroys your page, and re-renders it from scratch, and you need to start loading this image from the beginning. So this is going to slow down your largest contentful paint metric. What we're going to do in version 16 is, rather than destroying and re-rendering everything from scratch, when we download the scripts for your app, Angular is going to traverse the DOM and try to match it to what it expects to see. So it is going to add event listeners and build internal data structures and make your application interactive like this. So this is kind of non-destructive hydration, or some people just call it hydration. And it is going to definitely improve Core Web Vitals. Based on some early data, with about 45%, mostly around largest contentful paint. The cool thing is that we are building this in mind with like lazy loading in mind. So let's say you have a lazily loaded route on the page. And when we are hydrating your application, we're going to discover that this part of the view is lazily loaded. And we're going to wait for the code associated with it to get delivered in the browser, and we're going to hydrate that asynchronously, which enables a lot of things, like enables the so-called progressive hydration. So you don't have to download the whole JavaScript for your application to make it interactive. You can download particular islands of your JavaScript, of your UI, and progressively make your application interactive over time.
What my question is in terms of the developer experience, right? Of what we need to think about when we go to do that, right? Like, I think like that's one of the challenges. And if we go back to like modules and now standalone, and like this idea, this mind map of having to understand when we write this code, what's actually happening, what are we delivering in bundles, and how do we control that? And I think that that's a challenging thing that we face in understanding, do we need to care about that? Like, so when we talk about this sort of thing, like, is it going to be something that's baked in, or are we also as developers going to have to think about how to architect that process? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I keep saying about the trade-offs in developer experience that some of the trendy like hydration mechanisms set, and that's the case also with just basic non-destructive hydration. If you are doing a lot of manual DOM manipulations and you're not using the framework to render your application, but let's say you just do like document.query selector all, and you go over your DOM and you update it manually, the framework doesn't know about these changes, so it might not be able to hydrate properly this part of the view, and it will have to re-render it. That's why we'll be providing a flag called ngSkip hydration. I'm surprised how nobody noticed that on GitHub, because we released that too. We have ngSkip hydration for components that needs to perform such manual DOM manipulations. For them, we're not going to hydrate them, we're going to re-render them. So that's a constraint.
Is that only on a component level?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get kind of stressed out as a developer thinking about the work that needs to go into what you were just talking about. So big props to the Angular team that's working on that code and being concerned about like not breaking everything.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big task. So
Yeah. One good thing is, oh, by the way, Alyssa, I think it might be on, because this is a directive, so I think it is on an element level actually. The ng skip hydration. You can skip hydration on a particular element, I guess, where you set it.
It's a directive. You just plop it on the element.
Yeah. And also, I think it's going to be a component property. I'm not
And
sure
it
if we finalize this API yet.
flows down, I'm assuming. So anything inside of that is
Yeah.
going to be okay.
Yeah, something that is good that like we definitely don't want to break anyone, and we have like many tests, but also we have like a lot of code in Google, and if we break something, we know and we fix it. So that's just like a great guarantee.
yeah. I mean, you're still getting heat. You're just not getting heat publicly yet, but internally you have plenty of heat to confirm that everything's working, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, by the time we get it, it's, you know, everything looks peachy.
So I'm surprised because you were talking about this hydration as of V16.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to do the islands of hydration in V16.
Well, we're going to unlock the feature. We're
Okay.
going to have hydration in version 16.
Uh-huh.
The islands, I mean, yeah, theoretically they're possible, but we're going to support it only for lazy loaded routes at first.
Okay.
In the future, version 17, we're thinking of expanding this a little bit more. So we're exploring conditional hydration. What happens when you want to hydrate part of the view based on a certain condition.
Okay.
So this is, I'm just talking about it. We haven't announced it yet, and the plans for it and how it is going to happen are not there, but this is an area that we're very interested in.
Do you think, like, let's pretend tomorrow conditional hydration's a thing. How does that look for, like, if I'm a developer and I'm like, I would like to conditionally hydrate this dashboard.
Yeah.
Like, is it just a directive? Is it something in config? Is it something in my routes? Like, where am I telling this to happen?
Yeah, you can say Angular hydrate this part of the view.
Okay.
When something happens.
So you think it would be higher up than like inside the okay.
Yeah. It's going to be in the template, and Angular is going to figure out what it needs to download in order to make this part of your application interactive.
Because before standalone, I would have been like, put it in your module. That's where you tell it. You tell it in the module. And now I'm like, nothing can go in the modules. The modules are not safe. Right? So just mapping it out in my head to understand where this feature is going. Okay, cool.
Yeah, imagine you have part of your component, part of your view, and you just want to say hydrate never. That's a server-side component already there. You don't have to download as part of your JavaScript bundle because this component is only on the server. It doesn't handle any user interactions.
So does that make the story of like server-side rendering? Like if I have an app and I don't have server-side rendering right now, and the app's pretty massive, and I would love to have server-side rendering, but I feel like it's kind of a large take to try and get there, right? And to think about, like, is there open the door maybe for some more iterative approach with this hydration, or maybe I could say, okay, I'm kind of getting there. Like maybe I have a part in my initial spot that I want to get from the server that's just cached and ready to go, and other parts, almost like a chunk of CMS content or something. Like, could I explore that as an iterative approach to kind of getting to server side rendering sort of thing?
I see. Well, it's not going to be directly supported in the CLI. And you need to have one thing that we're feeling really strongly about is to have different entry points for client and for server. We want to have the separation because we don't want your server code to leak into the client by mistake, because it's very easy if the boundaries are blurry. Which means that, I mean, you can skip and not server-side render some part of your application for sure. You can do that given you have different entry points in your, you can like recreate some of the components and maybe in your server part, and maybe skip, like delay parts of your application that are not ready for server-side rendering just yet. So I guess that's something that you could theoretically do today with re-implementing some of the components that should be used only on the server.
Like I almost vision it where I could say these components are server side rendered, and so when my application runs up, they're getting them like already ready to go. But I could bring them in at any given time, right?
I see.
I thought of the opposite way, Justin, where it's like this whole app is SSR, except for that one piece right there. Don't look at that, right? Like that's what. So which way is it? Like, are you?
I'm asking for the other way.
Oh, you want the other way.
It'd be
I
cool
gotcha.
to maybe
Okay.
potentially, is that unlocking a potential for me to do, right? With these tooling that are coming, maybe there's a roadmap where I can make that happen. We can make that happen, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and just skip hydration. I would say that this is an option. This is something that would be kind of in this theme, because you would be skipping. So you know that this component is doing some things that it's not supposed to be doing, like touching the DOM like just traversing the DOM and just touching the DOM not through the framework but through manual DOM APIs.
Yeah.
In this case, you can skip hydration in this component. Yeah, I'll say that this is probably the best, probably like towards the goals that you were heading to.
Yeah. And are there any thoughts with the implementation for hydration for on-demand server-side rendering to also make way for tools like Scully that provide build time rendering and marking items as hydratable or hydration at that time as well?
You mean to mark? Yeah. You're marking them at dev time. Yeah, you're specifying the skip hydration attributes in dev time, so you can skip parts of the yeah.
Because I imagine that would need to be factored in by a tool like Scully that we don't necessarily want to hydrate a particular element or whichever way you want to go with any given element at pre-render time, to be able to respect those rules as well.
Yeah, you're respecting these rules for any environment in which you server-side render, I guess, you build time or on the server or eventually on the edge.
I like it.
Yeah, I guess.
Just trying to think of that future of what that looks like there.
Yeah, that's on the server-side rendering front. We're also doing some changes in components. In fact, we have been working with Google Material Design team to make the Angular Material implementation the public reference Material 3 implementation for the web. So if people want to see the latest Material spec for the web, they can go to material.angular.io, and that's what it is going to be. It's not there yet because we're still figuring out the specification for the web. There are a lot of tokens because Material 3 enables very high level of customization. It has dozens, maybe hundreds of design tokens that would allow you to configure your components. So that's something that we're currently working on and expecting it to land after version 16. And in the meantime, also, there are dozens of features on GitHub, such as required inputs that is going to be part of version 16, or passing different routing parameters as inputs, or self-closing tags, or support for content security policy with inline styles, and all these things that are going to be part of the version 16 release, and probably more. We have a couple of people who are really excited about bringing all these features to developers, and they're very productive people.
And the majority of these are like, we get them, but we're still able to work without them. Like, they're not breaking changes, right?
No, yeah, they're just further enhancements. So you can just configure your inputs to be required by passing required through. Yeah, so that's I think most of the scope of version 16. Let me check the blog post that I've been drafting.
And the required inputs, that's something that'll help us solve like dealing with when we create these inputs and have to like track down like when do we have to like null guard or things like that on that we end up doing. That's going to help us with that story, right? So we don't have to think about some of those things. We just say, hey, this is required, and then maybe it'll surface that at build time to tell us like, oh, we got to fill the gaps here.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have, exactly. If you have a template or and you're using a directive or a component there, and you want to mark one or more of the inputs of this component or directive as required, and you don't set it in the template, the Angular language service and the Angular compiler is going to fail at build time, asking you to specify a value, which is pretty helpful to get this guarantee that you have the value actually set.
I'm super excited about that because I'm very passionate about like components APIs, right? And the surface of that, and how do we make reusable components and then tell the story for people upstream how to use it, right? And so being able to say like, hey, this thing has 3 inputs, but I definitely need these 2. So, you know, it's going to help with that API surface for components that we develop. Super stoked.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot the whole section actually. Tooling. We have things happening there.
I saw Sander and he was like, what about tooling?
Good one. Thank you for reminding us. So actually we have there is a lot there. We have actually, Mike, you're involved in one of the new tooling things that we'll be shipping with the standalone flag.
Oh my goodness.
I have a I think I've merged in 2 PRs so far, and Alan has also merged in at least a couple PRs, helping with that. So, do you want me to talk about it, or you want to talk about it?
Do you want to talk about it?
Yes, I can. That's fine. So the idea of standalone was introduced in 15.1 or so, or my 14.2. Or
15 they were stable already, so I guess in 14 something.
Okay, so standalone's been in Angular for a bit now, and you're able to generate components, directives, and pipes with the standalone flag. But what was missing was the ability to create an entire application without NgModules being standalone. So there's a standalone flag that's been added to both ngNew and ngGenerate application to specify that everything in there will be standalone.
Like all of it, like the whole thing.
Whole thing.
Like not a module was
Nope.
harmed in the making of this application type of thing. Like it's just.
I can't say that they weren't harmed because we did kind of kill them when that flag is on.
Cool. Gotcha.
But they're not there no more.
And what about existing applications that are not using standalone yet, but they like the APIs and they want to move to them?
I wasn't part of this initiative, but there are some schematics to be able to migrate from a module-based application to a standalone application. And the other main thing is framework level, that there's interoperability between having standalone pieces and module pieces in the same application.
Yeah. That was Christian who implemented the migration schematics, and with NgGenerate, what is it? NgGenerate Angular core colon standalone.
Yes.
I was supposed to record this.
You're supposed to record what? I actually went through and used it, and I didn't know it was Christian who wrote it. So I will be hunting him down to thank him. I was a little confused. I was like, why am I using a generate command because it's kind of like I need like an ungenerate command, right? Like
Yeah. Oh, I had to record a video of this on Wednesday, and I just remembered how many times I had to repeat NgGenerate at Angular/core colon standalone. And it just was my slow day. So I think I read it 15 times, maybe. Very patient.
So I took that journey in an app manually, and it's in the process of doing it. And I just want to say that like, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty low effort, and it's really slick how, some of the functions and things that are there for Angular to help make that easy to have this interoperability, right? I got an application that has NgModules in a lot of places and now is having standalone, and anything new is all standalone, and they coexist. Right. And we're finding ways to navigate that, and the the helper functions and things like that the Angular platform provides has really made that story pretty low effort and clear to get there. So hit a couple bumps, figured out how to do that. Like one of the biggest things was we have a module that still exists that has some constructor code in it that we still need to consume, but we want to have a full standalone tree in the route, right? So I forget the function, the helper function of like provide
router
modules, what route? Yeah. And so do that in the router provider, but bring in our existing ng module and everything still runs. And so, and then when we have a component that's not standalone, but I need to use that in that route tree, that's full standalone in the route tree, figured out how to, get that solved. So Yeah, it's a great story that Angular's provided for getting there with kind of minimal friction and existing those both worlds. And you can take advantage of it. The standalone right away. I always tell like, go do standalone. Even if in your NgModule app, do it now. Like start exploring it because there's a road to live and coexist.
Yeah.
I want Chaos Monster to know you're not alone. I too have mourned modules. I love them. But I see the future without them. So I'm right there with you, man. Like I was feeling like it's like a part of me, like I've known this. This is me. What are you taking part? No, right? So I feel you on that. But I see where Angular is headed, and I really do think it's a cool place. And I know that like obviously interoperability, they can coexist. You can keep chugging along with your modules. But if you see like where this train's heading, I think you have to admit to yourself you must, at some point.
Yeah, one thing about
the future.
The schematics, as you mentioned, they can move your components directly in pipe to standalone. They can even remove your NgModules if you don't need them anymore, and they can move your bootstrap. So there is a wizard you go through there. And also NgModules, we're not gonna like just stop. They're not just gonna stop. We're not gonna stop supporting them. They're gonna be there. There is going to be this interop story, but we just believe that the standalone APIs are simpler to use. But if developers are still really focused on and really love NgModules and find value in them, I'm not anticipating them to go away anytime soon. We'll be
so like not in version 17. Like
I'm not expecting them to go away in
version 17.
Like
you heard it here first.
A lot of time.
While they may not be going away with NgModules, I'll ask a different question. Do you see a time in the relatively near future where the default behavior of generating an application is without NgModules?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And but if you want to generate this application with NgModules, the option is still going to be there.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not talking about taking away people's love or hate of NgModules, but if you want to use them, the interop is still there to be able to use them. But I'm talking about the prescribed, hey, we suggest doing things
the way of doing
without.
Things, right.
Yeah. And well, we have also recognized, like we're running a developer survey, as you know, and we hear a lot of feedback from people there. So people, they have ideas for some more ergonomic way to develop components as well. So this is something like we don't have time to cover everything about the routing, but I see also the time is advancing. So we can chat a little bit about tooling, with ESBuild and Vite and
yeah, I know. Sander keeps saying Vite. Can we what is that? What is he talking about? Why is he so excited? What? Does this have to do with the ergonomic component bit that you just mentioned, or is this a totally separate?
It is separate, yeah.
Oh, okay.
We can like cover it in a couple of minutes. So we have been doing experiments with ESBuild for over a year now, I guess. And in version 16, we're expecting to have developer preview, not only experimental, but developer preview NgSurf and NgBuild with ESBuild. One thing was that with NgSurf, we needed also a different development server. And because ESBuild works really well with Vite, which is something that Evan, you created, and it is getting a lot of traction in the community, we'll be using it as our development server in NgSurf. This doesn't mean that we'll be changing the compilation model of Angular yet, because Vite expects you to be able to compile every single file independently. So if you have a file, you just compile it with the Angular compiler, and after that with TypeScript to a JavaScript file. And with Angular, you can't really do that because of selectors. Selectors are not a JavaScript thing, and you need to maintain like a bigger dependency graph. So that's part of it. But also, we have been hearing that you don't need selector for every single component out there. For some components, you can do something else. You can just import the component and maybe directly start using it in your template in a similar way that you can do that in TSX. I'm not saying that Angular is going to be doing TSX. Chances are that we're not going to be doing TSX, because it's just similar to Signals implementation. If we adopt something that is not built for Angular, we'll have to bend it and make sure it works with Angular, and it's going to look artificial and not get. TS6 is designed for React, and it's great there. I've used it for my startup in the past, and I love that. And it's not going to be the best developer experience with Angular, most likely, but who knows? So being able to import individual components and use them in your templates enables us also to have this per file compilation model, which, as you can imagine, could be really fast. So this is something that is further in the future, though, maybe next year.
So when you're saying we can import them into our templates, what does that mean from a developer standpoint? Are you saying that like we can just use those elements in our template and not have to, like if we're doing standalone, we don't have to declare that in the imports of the standalone? Or what is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we don't have syntax for this yet, and this is not officially prioritized project just yet, but we are seeing very big interest in this space. This doesn't mean also that selectors are going away because they are very powerful. They're super powerful. And in fact, frameworks without selectors, they really want to have them as a built-in feature, because a good example was the image directive we released.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't have to rewrite your templates. You just change SRC to NgSRC. This matches the selector of the image directive, and everything works.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So
to the Vite and ESBuild, or were you going to continue on that, Justin?
No, right. Good.
But the feature I like it most about the Angular CLI is that as the CLI team plays with all these fun new features with ESBuild and Vite and what have you, and whether or not the usage of Webpack is continued or anything like that, is that it's completely transparent to the user. I still just run ngBuild, I run ngserve, and the really smart people behind the scenes say, hey, I know what to do with this. I can take that input of your application and give you the output of this is what you should deploy. Then I don't have to worry about that. I don't need to spend brain cycles about that. And that kind of parallels the idea of, hey, I had to learn about this thing, NgModules. I used to have to learn about Webpack, but now I can just worry about my components, and now I can just run a CLI command.
Yeah,
I see parallels of less mental strain on developers of what they need to know, and can just focus on delivering features and delivering user experiences. I love that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I'm not sure if I touched on that enough, because none of this is going to be breaking. Like, you want to use the new build toolchain. That's why we spent a year working on it, so that you can just use it without breaking your application. If you want to use standalone components, just use them. If you want to use NgModules, we can go ahead. We're probably going to have a recommended set of Angular that we like tell to people to use. For example, at a certain point, we're going to move from NgModules to standalone by default. But everything is going to be there. We're not going to break apps. That's like super important. That's really important for us.
I think it's time to talk about Facundo's amazing question that he opened with in the first 15 minutes of the show. And I was like, wow, we really got to get to that. And I think we've touched on it a little bit with what Mike just said and what Minko just said. But people who aren't fully into Angular see it constantly changing and sometimes find it a bit overwhelming. Is there a way to explain that actually having a new version with improvements is a good thing? So I think we should talk about this. I think it's a really good question.
Yeah. One thing is that, does it feel overwhelming that Angular increased major versions, or that it is changing? That's something that it hasn't been clear to me. A lot of people get really stressed out about the new versions, and I think it's our fault, because we have AngularJS and we call it Angular 1.
Oh, right.
And after that, we're like, oh, never mind, Angular 2. And after that, we're like, oh, we're gonna skip the 3. We're gonna go 4.
I envision this question being more, hey, I've seen a whole lot of blog posts, and they're talking about signals. They're talking about standalone. They're talking about a new build system within Angular.
Yeah.
Why is Angular in such a state of flux? And I understand that there's a lot of moving parts of recently, and I'm kind of rephrasing the question and kind of answering it at the same time. But I see Angular going to being simpler, to be more straightforward, to get back to the idea of, hey, this is your componentry, and we're writing some code that is able to support what that is. That everything is moving towards a simplification versus a complication of Angular. And I couldn't be happier with the recent directions.
Yeah, what Christopher here said is pretty accurate too. It can be overwhelming, I guess, and it should be explained as changes, not as changes, but as additions. That's true. And we're aiming exactly what Mike said, simplicity and better developer experience.
I think the number thing is an interesting thing to touch on. Like we're always talking about Angular 15, Angular 16, Angular 17. And really the number is just about how you do your package install, right? Like, should we take that out of the conversation? Just say, hey, the recent release of Angular is going to have these additional features, right? And no longer talk about the numbers so that people don't have that in their head. And it's more about, oh, well, if I want to consume those new features, how do I do it? The mechanics are I go ask for 17 versus 16, right?
But do other JavaScript communities not talk about their frameworks like this? Are we the only ones who do this?
I think they do.
Weird?
Yeah. I think other people, others do, right? But agnostic of what everybody's doing, like what's the problem, right? What's the challenge of reaching people and helping that understanding, and maybe that linguistics around it, right? It will help that story of people kind of not thinking about, because when I hear like we're on to 17, that's a lot of versions of Angular, right? And is it really like, are we really being concerned about the versions of Angular? Is it just kind of semantics, which technically it is, right? But we can get that out of the conversation and be more about like, hey, now Angular has this, now Angular has that.
A long time ago, talk about like 15 years ago, I remember having a conversation about version numbers, and as a developer, the decision about excuse me, as part of that conversation was when talking about a version number, the number is for how applications talk to each other. Hey, I have a new major version, there's some breaking changes. Hey, I have a feature, there's something new, and that's all there. But as a developer, don't concern yourself with the numbers, concern yourself with the features. And the fact that the version number may have changed, that's just how one program talks to another, or one package talks to another, and the rules around how they talk to each other based off of Semver. And other than that, just talk about features. So to your point, I completely agree. But computer transfer of knowledge versus human transfer of knowledge.
Well, yeah, that's very valid. What Justin you mentioned. Also, in our developer survey, it looks like 70% of the users are already. Oh, hi, Steven. Are already on version 7, version 6, version 6, version 15, and version 14, because we ran it like a few months ago. So people are staying up to date, and something that Steven actually has been talking about before he. When he was on the team, he was talking about the evergreenness of Angular, which is very much valid. So the tooling is getting better, and people are able to stay on the latest version with less effort than ever.
And I think that's a testament to the Angular team and the approach of implementing new features and functionality that are backwards compatible with each other, as well as when that may not be as applicable, to provide the automatic migrations through CLI version upgrades. The tooling there outclasses from the other frameworks that I've seen out in the community. The dedication to backwards compatibility.
My goodness, we are at the top of the hour. I know there were like some other things you wanted to like hint at or wink at in 17 and beyond. Is there anything, Minko, that you'd like to mention before we do picks and wrap up?
I think we're good for now.
Okay.
Maybe we can have another session sometimes to discuss about the deeper future.
Yeah, no, I love it. I will get it on the calendar. Oh my goodness. I am just so grateful. So grateful for this. And thank you for the questions, chat. It's been a really beautiful conversation. Let's keep having it online. Mike, I know you have a pick. Justin, be preparing if you have one to go, but Mike, go first.
I already talked about my pick. It was, or I think we talked about it online with the router, to be able to bind router parameters and query values as input properties on the component that you're routing to automatically pull those in.
Will you plot me that link and I'll put it in the chat too, so people.
It's in the top of the private chat. Is a Twitter chain that also links to that PR.
All right, Justin, what do you got?
So mine is a little Angular tip, and I'm actually glad that Minko's here, because I'm going to ask this, and because I don't know, some details here, right? So I can't remember if I didn't know this before, or if this is a bug or potential thing to consider. But on a route guard, we have can activate and can match, right? And if you have can activate and you have a function or a can activate service that returns like a URL tree to do like a redirect, and you have load children on that route, the load children still happens even though the can activate it may potentially reroute you somewhere, but a can match, the load children doesn't execute. And so if you're wanting to stop like anything below that route entry from happening, like a dynamic load children or whatever, you want to use can match instead of can activate. Does that sound like it's intended that way, Minko? That the can activate, because the documentation says can activate decides, and if you return a URL tree, it cancels navigation. But I found that it still loads the children, like lazy loads the
I honestly
module.
don't know. I honestly don't know. We should talk to Andrew, who is maintaining the router.
Oh, we have someone to bother.
We'll have to find out. But if you're trying to like stop a route, and you don't want any of that, the load children to happen, like consider looking into can match, for handling that redirect or stopping of that if you need to like, not go down that path. That's my pick.
Love it. I love it. Do you have a link or anything you want me to share with your pick, or no? Just the. Do you have any can match?
I mean, I just discovered it yesterday, so no, I haven't had time.
Justin.
I could, yeah. I'll look into something.
All right, my pick is Sander. If you're watching, 10 out of 10. And Facundo, he actually talks about this when he is teaching signals and kind of going into it's like just beautiful higher level of like, why is Angular doing this? What is happening here? And so I think he actually really touches on your question of the overwhelming changes in Angular and why, and just how it answers a lot of questions that have been hanging in the air for Angular for a long time. So 10 out of 10, check out the article if you haven't yet. Minko, do you have any picks?
Yeah. So Google I/O is happening on May 10th, and that's my pick. Go to io.google. We're going to have some...
Google.
We may have still some surprises. I don't know if you continue following the changelog on Angular and the commit history. All the surprises might be already on Twitter, but we're still going to have some exciting things that you can see there.
Yay! I don't know if you saw the chat, but there were many thanks for this episode. So thank you so much for your time, Minko. We appreciate you. I think I'll schedule the deeper future after 16 drops. So maybe we can like have an even, like 17, 18, 19 discussion. I don't know.
Sounds good.
Oh, but thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody. We are signing off until next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.